Hi, I'm Christian Lenhart, co-author of the Rio Grande Plan. Ever since we released our Top 10 Features video, we've gotten a lot of questions about topics that didn't make it into that video. So today, I'm going to answer some frequently asked questions. We also have an FAQ page on our website at riograndeplansaltlakecity.org, and a means to contact us with new questions if yours isn't answered already. Number 1. Is this an official plan? Who are you, and why are you proposing this? The first answer is no, this is not an official plan, but we hope that one day it will be. That's why we keep encouraging everyone to write to their state leaders in support of the Rio Grande Plan. As to who we are and why we are the ones proposing this plan, well, I'm a civil engineer and Cameron is a landscape architect. Through our larger consulting firms, we have worked on several projects you may recognize. For example, I'm very proud of the BYU South Campus UVX station, which I designed and modeled, and Cameron helped draw up the draft redevelopment master plan for the Ogden Union Station area. This is to say that the Rio Grande Plan is not the first transit station project for either of us, and our previous experience has helped us draft a plan that we think is feasible here in Utah. Most importantly, Cameron and I are both residents of Salt Lake City proper, and instead of spending our careers making other communities great places to live, we would rather apply the best practices of our professions to our own city, especially when there is such obvious potential just sitting there, waiting for a return to glory. Number 2. How are you going to get trains down into the train box? Trains cannot climb steep hills. It is true that most trains cannot climb steep hills. Light electric passenger trains, like tracks, actually can climb hills as steep as 7%, which is as steep as public roads are generally allowed to be in Utah due to the snow. Mainline freight trains, though, generally need to keep grades at 1% or less because they are extremely heavy. The average coal train you see rolling through downtown Salt Lake City can weigh as much as 20,000 tons, which is equivalent to 2 Eiffel Towers. You really don't want to get hit by that. Frontrunner commuter trains weigh about 50 times less, and so fall somewhere in the middle in terms of what they can climb. UTA allows a maximum grade of 2.5% per the UTA commuter rail design criteria, which you can download and read for yourself. All that said, the Rio Grande Plan has been designed to keep all grades at 1% or below, except in the one case of Frontrunner between 100 South and the North Temple Bridge Station, where we plan to use the maximum amount of 2.5%. Staying below 1% on the south end of the trench will be relatively easy. Beginning at about 13th South, the tracks will slowly descend below ground level until reaching the full depth of 33 feet by the time they cross under 900 South. The north end gets a bit trickier. One unfortunate casualty will be the community green space in the median of 500 West between the Gateway and the Liberty Gateway apartments. Because the tracks will need to start rising up exactly below this green space, it won't be possible to return this park to its current state. I was going to say original state, but its original state was a railroad corridor, which is why it's so wide even today, even by Salt Lake City standards. Our solution is to rebuild the public space on a slightly elevated deck that begins at street level at 100 South and slopes upward at 1% until terminating at South Temple, where it will be about 7 feet above street level. On top of this deck, you can put raised gardens, potted trees, water features, or whatever else you like. I think a pedestrian bridge to the second level of the gateway would be a welcome addition, and the top of the deck would be an excellent space to watch trains leaving and entering the train box. I think a good comparison would be the Main Street Plaza by Temple Square, including the large reflecting pool, all of which is built over top underground parking ramps. Obviously, it won't be the same as having a large green lawn, but if the grass is important, there will be 50 acres of new space for public parks to replace the lawn that was lost. Beyond South Temple, the Frontrunner tracks will need to climb at their maximum allowed rate of 2.5% so they can reach surface level just before the existing North Temple Bridge station. This station may need to be straightened a little bit, but otherwise it will not need any modifications to accommodate the Rio Grande Plan. The Union Pacific tracks will continue their steady 1% rise, and will reach the surface just before the grade crossing at 300 North. A common suggestion we receive is that the train box needs to be longer, going all the way to 600 North. I'm not opposed to the idea, but it does add additional costs. There is always a happy medium to be reached between effectiveness and cost, and after many discussions with city planners and leaders, I think the most effective option, for now, is to end the project before 300 North. There is also a spur that would need to curve from north to west, passing below a corner of Liberty Gateway Apartments and crossing under 600 West. The exact details of how to build a rail line underneath the corner of an existing apartment building will need to be worked out later, but needless to say, this has been done on other projects in other cities, and it can be done in Salt Lake City too. Also notice how all the historic buildings on this block follow the curve of the old railroad tracks, which is what we were following when we drew up our proposal. The Rio Grande Plan only proposes putting tracks back where they used to go historically, just this time below ground level. After going below 600 west, the spur track would then ramp up at a steady 1% grade and be tied in with the existing track by 900 west. This does mean that the 800 west crossing will need to be permanently closed, but to compensate, we propose rerouting that road to the east at approximately 50 north, or Dancy Drive, which would provide a new crossing-free connection straight into downtown, because remember, all of these tracks are about to be replaced. Lastly, let me reiterate that this is just our vision for the train box. There are other solutions that work. The point of this explanation is that grades will not be a problem for the Rio Grande Plan. Number 3. What about rail customers who rely on the tracks and the rail yards? So despite what I said in my last video, the rail yards downtown are not completely disused. There are a few remaining customers in this neighborhood who need access to rail transportation. However, I say remaining because the number of industries downtown is declining as the land values downtown continue to rise. For example, look at the history of cereal food processors on 500 South and 400 West. This mill used to be connected to the two rail lines on 400 and 500 West, and then through a special connector track at 450 South once the main lines were consolidated to the west. To maintain rail access, some pretty unusual crossing infrastructure was installed and maintained by Salt Lake City. In fact, it's still maintained to this day. This spur is also one of the main reasons for these yard tracks between the frontrunner main lines and 600 West. You can see that every accommodation was made to keep the mill operational, but it didn't matter. After all that investment, the mill still closed in 2017 and is now slated to be reused as apartments, which is pretty cool. I also need to note how happy I am to have found this website, millpictures.com. I'm always delighted to find appreciation for things even nerdier than my usual railfan websites. Good for you, mill fans, mill nerds, mill enthusiasts. You know who you are. The point is that as property values and property taxes continue to rise, these remaining industries will be able to make a nice profit by selling their land and relocating elsewhere. Salt Lake City is not lacking for available industrial space, and the area west of Redwood Road would be a great rail-accessible location to start over. But the important thing is, none of this needs to be rushed. My opinion is that it will be best to keep a rail spur from the main line into the old rail yards even after the train box is completed. When the businesses are ready to move on, they will, and eventually even the spur will be able to go too. Slow and steady change will take care of this problem without any unnecessary heartache. Number 4. Are you sure the water table won't be an issue? Yes, I am sure. Structures are built into the water table all the time without issue. For example, the pedestrian tunnels at Salt Lake City International Airport are actually submerged into the water table, and they require deep pilings down into the ancient lake bed in order to keep the air-filled tunnels from floating up to the surface. This is an extreme example. I don't expect the train box downtown to be nearly so complicated. Instead, I expect the Rio Grande train box to be more like the underground parking garages below the gateway. There are multiple levels of parking going down even deeper than the proposed train box, which will run just a few dozen feet to the west. It only makes sense that the solutions they're using to keep water out of the gateway, such as good sealants, drains, or pumps, will also work for the Rio Grande train box. Number 5. Is the glass roof over the platforms the final design? It looks too modern for me. No, the glass roof is not the final design. This project is still very much in the concept stage, and many things about it will inevitably change. For the glass roof specifically, Cameron and I wanted to show one of the flashier possibilities, something that would get people's attention. I really like it, and I hope that whatever design eventually gets selected is pretty similar. But there are other styles that could also be just as effective while drawing less attention. For example, one anonymous supporter sent us these drawings he created showing a more classic style of canopy that would better match the architecture of the Rio Grande Depot. In the end, what matters most is that the entrances to the below-grade platforms are protected. Anything beyond that is open to discussion. Another issue that viewers have raised concerns over is that the canopy could potentially block views of the historic depot. The new train hall at Denver Union Station faced a similar concern, and consequently, the canopy there has an enormous cutout, specifically to allow views of the historic headhouse. My opinion is that such a big hole in the roof obviates the utility of the entire structure. but I also have to agree that it does look pretty cool. It is worth pointing out that in Salt Lake City, we are 1. Proposing a much smaller structure, 6 tracks compared to 8, and 2. Proposing to protect tracks that are already below grade, as compared to Denver's ground-level tracks. Ah, if only Denver had stuck to their original concept of below-grade, through-running tracks, how much better their station could have been. Fortunately, there is still time for us to learn from their mistakes. In summary, the glass roof is an aesthetic choice that we made to promote the Rio Grande Plan, and the details are very much up for debate. Number 6. What is the formal process to get this plan officially adopted? The short answer is that there isn't any formal process for getting any single idea incorporated into the city master plan. In fact, our proposing an unsolicited solution is kind of backwards to how the city process usually works. The usual process involves the city identifying a problem, then performing a study of some kind that will explore solutions to that problem. Once several solutions have been formally identified, it falls to a committee, commission, or sometimes even a public referendum to decide on which solution best fits the needs of the community. In this way, we can be sure that taxpayer dollars are being spent wisely, and not on an individual politician's pet project that offer very little value beyond getting the said politician reelected. However, under this framework, a proposal like the Rio Grande Plan comes across to decision makers as a solution looking for a problem, no matter how obvious the problem may seem to residents, simply because the problem has not been formally justified or quantified through a study. The good news is that Salt Lake City is actively pursuing federal grant money in order to conduct such a study. In fact, they're on the second attempt. Their first try happened over the summer, when an application for a RAISE grant was denied. But that was to be expected, as the city had just won a RAISE grant the year before to study the potential tracks connection from the University Research Park down to the Intermodal Hub. Undeterred, the city has applied for a different grant, this one called Reconnecting Communities, with the intent of evaluating a potential train box against other alternatives for connecting the east and west sides of town. Should the city win this grant, a reputable engineering firm will be able to provide Utah taxpayers with a professional cost estimate, as well as validation or repudiation to the claims Cameron and I have made in our various presentations and videos. What happens after that depends highly on the results of the study. What is certain is that the cost of the train box is going to be significant, and that unless there is state or even federal support for this project, it isn't going to happen. The government of Salt Lake City, for all its enthusiastic and passionate personnel, many of whom I've had the privilege to meet with and discuss this plan, they simply won't have the resources to realize such an enormous construction project on their own. That is why it is vital for supporters of this plan to continue our public outreach and to make our support known to local and state leaders. Who knows? With full support from the state legislature, the Rio Grande Plan might be fast-tracked and state-financed, similar to other billion-dollar freeway projects we've seen in recent years. Perhaps the return of the Winter Olympics in 2030 or 2034 would prompt or accelerate the Rio Grande Plan in the same way that the original TRAX light rail system was expedited in 1999 and 2001. I think such a scenario would be especially satisfying, since it was the 2002 Winter Olympics and the multiple associated downtown improvement projects that prompted the closure of the Rio Grande Depot in the first place, in favor of the new intermodal hub. It would be nicely poetic to have the next Winter Olympics enable the project that would not only return trains to the original depot, but would upgrade that same station to a world-class facility and serve visitors and residents for generations to come. Well, that's a half dozen questions. Probably a good place to stop. If you have more questions, please leave them in the comments below or on our website. Also, be sure to stay tuned for future updates and events. Thanks for watching. See you next time.